Hello guys and welcome to the first video of the week number 13. We're almost done guys, almost there. Hope everything is going well with your project. I am actually including over here in this week a little format to remind you like specifically what you have to do. I think we have discussed this in several occasions, but I know that sometimes it might be useful to have this information like written on, and well, that is why I'm including that. We're almost done. I have already posted in the past specific dates, like a calendar for what we have left, such as the delivery of the report, of the observation of the students of 10th semester, and of course the report for and the written report, and also the oral let's say support of what you're going to say. Yes, the presentation about this observation process about the infant, and of course also the one related to the final test, right? So hopefully everything's there, everything's clear. As I mentioned, I'm going to include this additional format. I just want to encourage you to try and do this with enough anticipation. I mean, hopefully this should be almost done by the time you watch this video. If it isn't, well guys, I really encourage you to do this as soon as possible, because it's really important, right? It will be problematic if you don't work soon enough with this, okay? Well, as usual, I would like to share a little poem with you, like the last weeks I had not, because I was really concerned about the fact that you had enough information to work in anticipation. So I wanted to concentrate that, for focus on that, right? So this one is actually the introduction to a song by Joaquin Sabina, who's called No Sobran los Motivos. And well, every time that he plays this song in like live, he used to provide this little poem. So as I mentioned before, it's called No Sobran los Motivos. Este adiós no maquilló un hasta luego. Este nunca no escondió un ojalá. Estas cenizas no juegan con fuego, este ciego no mira para atrás. Este notario firma lo que escribo, esta letra no la protestaré. Ahórrate el acuse de recibo, estas vísperas son las de después. A este ruido, tan huérfano de padre, no voy a permitirle que taladre un corazón podrido de latir. Este pez ya no muere por tu boca. Este loco se va con otra loca. Estos ojos no lloran más por ti. I really like it's very definitive somehow. Now definitely it's a way to say goodbye to somebody, to say farewell. The first thing that we can imagine is that's most likely a romantic, if we can call it that way, separation. Like a couple of guys who are somehow disrupt and broke up with the relationship. But again, it can be just saying goodbye to a habit you have, to an addiction, well, love is an addiction somehow at some point, right? But well, it may have a lot of different meanings, which is why I really like it. I think it's very well structured. We're going to use actually this poem for a particular task in an assignment later on, so don't lose it completely out of sight. It's not only for pleasure, okay? Well guys, so this week we're going to deal with levels of conversation. If you go to the slide number 67, if you are so kind. So this has to do with certain things that we have mentioned many times throughout the course of the course, which is what is happening, or what is it, the process that takes place from thought to output. Yes, we have talked about some generalities. So here we're going to talk specifically about certain things. So what is it that really takes place, whatever it takes place in, if you want to call it mind, brain, neural central system, central neural system, so we can have an output. This output may be usually articulation, spoken, or it may be written, and well, there are different ways, like even sign and body language somehow is out there. Okay, so we're going to see that we have low levels in this process of thinking and then making or transforming this thinking into conversation or into an output. And we have also higher levels, right? You will notice when we're done with this video that the low levels are basically most of them, right? Let's say that the description that I'm going to provide is specifically about the low levels. Most of them is going to be about it. And then we have the higher levels, and I think that if my memory does not betray me, there's like one slide about it. Yes? So, of course, the higher level seems to be the most important one somehow, or the most complicated ones. But my point over here is that without the low levels of comprehension, it will be, or conversation, sorry, or, well, we will have like different levels over here. It will be like almost impossible to reach those higher levels. So that is why we concentrate as much in the low levels, because basically it's an addition of things, conducts, behaviors, and processes in general that will eventually allow us to reach those higher levels, right? Very well. So if we go to the slide 68, we will see, let's say, these two levels over here, which seems to be pretty evident, right? Seems to be like really obvious. You may say, like, really, are we discussing about this? Well, it's important that we know for classification and for labeling processes, right? So there's the first level, that is the level of production, right? Like this guy over here on the left is thinking about a beer, and he says, I am thirsty, right? So that is production. He is producing this speech. He's producing these words, this articulation, the sound waves, and everything that eventually turns into this sentence of I am thirsty, right? So that is the production part. Then we have the perception and comprehension levels, right? So the perception will be simply somehow, let's say, getting the sound waves and somehow decoding a little bit of them, right? So that would be like noticing that there was somebody who said, I am thirsty, right? So being able to understand those words. And then the comprehension is a little bit deeper, right? Like if you see the guys sort of thinking about like certain options that this person may have. Yes, so if you see in the picture, there's like an arrow and there's a recipient over there, and that might be water, right? So even though the guy is thinking about beer, the other person is saying, or well, it's not saying, sorry, it's processing and comprehending that he requires some hydration, and that one of the options may be water. Of course, if he keeps on thinking, and the better that he comprehends the other person, the most quantity of options he's going to be able to provide, right? So, I don't know, think about water, juice, a specific beverage. If you know a little bit your friends, probably you could actually anticipate that what he wants is beer, or well, there are different things over there, right? But in general, we have this level that is the one of perception, which is basically getting an comprehension that is actually deciphering and actually being proactive, anticipating, and sometimes being able to propose, right? So here we have a couple of low-level processes in this interaction that we just saw. The first one, that is the one of articulation. So this, let's say, process by which we move our mouth and the tongue, and vocal cords vibrate, and well, everything that's, let's say, technical in the physical production of sound, right? This is we have the articulation part, and then the perception, that is basically the capacity of receiving these sound waves that are produced by articulation. Yes, those are like these two different things that we have over here. Now, as you can see over there, it says that not all levels of production or reception imply a cognitive process, right? Like, and we have seen that a lot. Like, people talk, and that is not necessarily an evidence of how insightful they are, or that they have really higher cognitive processes, right? People listen to different things, and that doesn't mean that they filter that, or that they understand that, or that they are able to use the information wisely somehow, right? So some are automatic or merely physiological, yes, controlled by the central neural system rather than linguistic, right? So most of these low-level processes, especially this one of articulation and perception, are, let's say, functional or physical, and as it says over there, automatic, yes. They don't imply any level of let's say, cognitive elaboration, or let's say a conscious linguistic process. Of course, as I mentioned before, like, we require those low-level processes in order to build upon and then create much more complex structures, right? I have here an example of something like that, like a hand motion while writing. Yes, that is automatic. Eventually it becomes like a reflex somehow, and you don't necessarily think about or decide like the best posture for your hand, or how the angle of inclination or rotation of your wrists. I don't know. It's something that is most of the time at this, let's say, age, automatic. It deals with the fact that you were taught some way in preschool and the initial years. Yes, the elementary years of education. It deals with, for example, you have some illustrative training or desires, well, etc. But let's say that the position of our hand, or the motion of our hand while we're writing, is not necessarily a let's say a cognitive or well, let's say a linguistic process, right? Now we're going to have one assignment this week, and it will have like different parts, right? So please be attentive to each instruction that I will be given, because I think that we're going to have 2 or 3 parts. This will be the first one, right? So if you go into the slide number 17, you will see an exercise, right? It says, translate, quotes, the following words into regular English, and then write a different sentence using each one of them, right? So we have these with the phonetic alphabet. Hopefully you still remember that, right? So we're basically going to say, wish is this word. We're going to translate it into regular English, and we're going to write a sentence with each one of them, okay? Now, what's the point of this exercise, right? Of course, into a presential class, it will be much better. That is what I normally do. And well, it will help somehow identify these articulation and perception processes. Like we uh, normally try like to say those aloud, and of course once you perceive it and comprehend it, you will be able like to do something with that, right? Like the sentence. um, so that is what we're going to do in the exercise number one. um, if you don't remember this, I'm sure that you can find this online, yeah, but try to do it as much as possible using your own memories, because that's the whole point of the exercise now, to check on the let's say production and perception and comprehension. Yes, that is basically what we have over here. So that will be like the first part. um, as usual, you can work in groups of up to 5 people, and well, this will be the first part of the assignment. Let's go with the next one, guys. And we have these lexical processes that do have a linguistic level, right? So we already talked about the articulation. We already talked about the perception. So here we're dealing with something that is much more linguistic. Yes, the previous ones were sort of automatic, if you want to call it in that way. But basically over here we have that these processes, or the goal of these processes, is to retrieve extra knowledge to produce meaningful interpretations, selecting the most adequate one for the communicative situation. So once we have been able to speak and listen, a very simplified way, well, we're required to reach that stored knowledge, that toolbox that we have of vocabulary, semantics, grammar, a lot of different things that we have stored over there, in order to interpret this, let's say, input that we're receiving into the most adequate way. Yes. That is why that in careless or not distinct speech you can understand different things. If you are receiving or you're listening or reading anything without a context, you may have let's say a lot of different interpretations, right? That may be not exactly the one that the person who made it or who articulated first was intended to do. Yes. The idea is that this is another, let's say, somehow low-level process that is nevertheless higher, right? Because it deals with all these linguistic components. Let's focus on this lexical access units, that, as you can see over there in the chart, are labeled as lexical entries, right? So for this input that we receive from articulation, we can analyze at least these four components, right? The morphological specifications, yes, let's say the sentence or word that I listen to have some really specific morphological components that I have to distinguish from one another. We have the phonological specifications, right? And how does it sound, and whether like the components in terms of phonology, and took a whole subject about that, so I guess that you're experts. Right, the phonological components of these sentence words or whatever, it has to do, of course, with words that may sound similarly or even exactly in the same way, the homophones. Sometimes it's necessary to distinguish this, yes, specifically in the case of those words that sound exactly in the same way, yes. So in order to get the message, you require to analyze in a fraction of a second these phonological specifications. The the syntactic array specifications, so everything that has to do with the syntax of, for example, a sentence, right? So you also require to analyze that really quickly. Your brains requires to do so, and then decide somehow if you're dealing with an affirmation, with a question, with a negative sentence, um, and let's say everything that has to do mm, with the syntax, right? And we have the conceptual specification. So what sort of concept or concepts are associated to this communication, right? And hopefully in a very Osbelian way, I have this exercise of the fly. Yes, I think that people who have taken classes with me before would remember that I applied this exercise often in formas discursivas, right? I also do it in sometimes on written composition, and it's what are the meanings of the word fly. Yes, so fly can be an insect. Yes, fly can be the verb. Yes, the action of flying, and for example, we have the word bar fly, that is like slang for a person who is sort of drinking all the time and who is let's say wandering around a bar all the time. Yes, so that's why it seems like a fly or something like that. And well, that's it. Yes, so hopefully you get the idea that in a really short span of time you're required to analyze all of these components: morphological, phonological, syntactic, and conceptual, right? So that's a little bit of what we have over here. The segmentation part, we're going to just leave it for now. It's not really that important right now. I would like you to focus on that. Let's say that this is a little bit of what we have over here. If you go to the slide number 72, this process that I just mentioned about sort of deciding has a more technical name, if you want to call it that way, and it's parsing. Yes. And what is that? Well, basically what I just mentioned. If you read the definition, it says on the basis of lexical and morphological information associated with each element in a sentence, a functional structure is generated: subject, verb, object. This involves two central activities: morphological analysis and syntactic analysis. So by means of doing this analysis and reaching out our resources and our knowledge toolbox, yes, or communicative repertoire, that is for Formas as well, right? So we will be able to generate this structure that is the pretty, let's say, simplistic, well, not simplistic, but at least classical, I guess, but at this point of your career, it should be like really clear for you. The different grammar structures for a sentence, no? Such as the subject, verb, object, subject, verb, component, right? And well, as I mentioned before, this would require at least the morphological and the syntactic analysis, yes, to be able to deal or understand or discriminate, maybe could be a better word, all these different components, parts, intentions in the phrase or in the sentence that you're dealing with. Okay, very well. I'm going to leave this video over here. In the next one, we will be talking about some of the additional, let's say, assignment or parts of this assignment that we will have, that is based on what I have just mentioned. And of course, the higher levels, that is something as I mentioned before, really short. Okay, thank you very much. See you in the next video. Bye bye.